Our keynote speaker today is one of those individuals that not only has been a mentor to many of us, he's one of those individuals that has really thought out of the box and really helped us in our field of work.
Well, my understanding is the conference is actually looking at different ways of measuring economic security, social well-being, and they brought basically people from all over the country who've been working in the area to see if they could get some coherency as we sort of rethink the way the United States government officially measures poverty. What I want to do is present some ideas to you that really amplify the work that you're doing. I think this report, the thing about othering and belonging is extremely important, and we actually are starting to get better at measuring that. And I use that term, which you probably haven't heard very often, othering, because it actually talks about marginalization across several different axes. So you can use it around race, you can use it around ethnicity, you can use it around religion, you can use it around sexual orientation. So the process of othering, which is how we define who belongs and who doesn't belong, is quite important, and that's part of the thing we need to be measuring. We can actually measure where groups are in terms of how far they are from the center of the circle, what I call the circle of human concern, and at some point they fall outside the circle of human concern. That is, they cease to be human, that these people don't really count. And their lives are going to be truncated in hundreds of ways. And so you're going to see a data point after data point after data point, negative things happening. But it's happening not just because of those data points, not because they don't have enough education, but because we've said they're not really members. You don't belong. So that message of people belonging or not belonging is actually quite a powerful message that I think animates much of our work. And so people are situated in structures not just as individuals, but as groups. And I talk a lot about race or about gender or about what does that mean. We're talking about social location when we talk about those things. We're not talking about someone's skin color or the genetics. We're talking about where they're located within structures, both physical structures, but also cultural structures. And those structures have powerful impacts in terms of life outcomes. And in the United States, we have a hard time doing that. We not only sort of promote the idea of race blindness and otherness blindness, we also tend to be structurally blind. So we don't see structures, like everybody can do anything. But structures are never neutral, and they affect people differently. So part of the work is to understand how we're situated in relationship to structures. And so again, here's a guy in a wheelchair. No one thinks about building an escalator to punish the guy in a wheelchair, but that structure actually creates a disability for him or her. And the solution oftentimes also tends to be very individualistic. So if you see someone in a wheelchair trying to get to the third floor and there's an escalator, what do? Well, you could get the guy a couple of crutches, and then stand him up and say good luck, right? And he's going to be very clumsy on an escalator because an escalator still will carry that bias. So sometimes we fix the person and not the structure. So if you look at a lot of our work, we'll sort of look at how these structures are actually creating unequal outcomes, and then we try to fix the person instead of the structure. So we're in these structures, and I think in terms of your work, in terms of measuring things, you won't necessarily do all of this. But get people to understand, and for you to understand, the relationship between these structures. You won't always be able to communicate it in every measurement, but to understand the relationships. You're not just talking about things, you're talking about relationship between things. And when the structural relationships produce negative outcomes along the axis of race, I call that structural racialization. We've organized the structure, we've organized these different systems so that they will have a negative effect and end up marginalizing certain populations. So going back to economic security, there are different ways of talking about it, but you can have coherency. You can have things pointing in the same direction. And so we talk about, at Kerwin, we talked about communities of opportunities, we talked about targeted universalism, and enhancing the circle of human understanding or human concern. And it's actually interesting, the way of actually talking about race and other marginalized communities through opportunity structures actually lowered the temperature. It allowed us to talk about race, but it allowed us to do it in a way that people felt like, okay, I get it. You're not saying I'm a racist, but these structures are producing some of these negative outcomes. We also talked about targeted universalism. And targeted universalism is like a lot of things, a very simple concept that gets complicated very quickly. So let me just give you the simple part of it. It's basically saying we have universal goals, but targeted strategies based on our situatedness within structures. So we don't want structures, or we don't want strategies that are universal. We want strategies that are tailored toward getting everybody to the same outcome, but recognizing people have different ways of getting there. So let's say we're all going to DC. Some of us on a bike, some of us in cars, some of us are flying. The method of getting there and the support for getting there needs to be different based on our pathway. So part of it is to situate the group so you can say, oh, this is where this person is within this structure. And if we want them to get there, we need to do this, just like the guy on getting on the escalator. And it doesn't mean giving him the same thing as you give the person who can get on the escalator. You have to actually give him something different and sometimes something more. We're a very diverse society. We're becoming more diverse. How do we actually maintain a healthy, vibrant, inclusive democracy? That's what we should be aiming for, and that's what we should be measuring.